Welcome to your deep dive. Today we're cracking open Freakonomics by Stephen D. Levitt and Stephen J. Dubner.
Oh, yeah.
And you've handpicked some really intriguing excerpts here. And it looks like you're really interested in the power of incentives, how they work, where they backfire the whole 9 yards.
You know, it's funny because it's like peeking behind the curtain of everyday life. Freakonomics uses economics to explain the things we usually don't associate with money, like cheating, crime, even baby names.
Right.
It's really interesting.
First, though, I got to ask about the authors themselves.
Okay.
A journalist and an economist.
Right.
That's not your typical writing duo.
Right.
How did that even come to be?
Yeah, they even talk about how they initially underestimated each other.
Oh, really?
Dubner was surprised by how economists struggled to just explain things simply.
Yeah.
And Levitt was really taken aback by how some journalists kind of overlooked rigorous thinking.
Yeah.
So they both had their own preconceived notions coming in.
But they found common ground in their curiosity.
It did.
And thank goodness they did.
Yeah.
I mean, Levitt's approach to economics is anything but textbook.
Right.
He's more interested in how people get what they want.
Yeah.
Right. Whether it's a deal on a house or a winning streak in sumo wrestling.
Totally.
He's looking at all these different facets of life.
It's like he uses economics as this lens to understand human behavior. Instead of focusing solely on money, he really digs into those motivations and strategies that people use to kind of achieve their goals.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating.
And that brings us to kind of our main theme here, incentives.
Okay.
The book is packed with examples of how incentives drive decisions, sometimes in totally unexpected ways.
Yeah, sometimes for the good, sometimes not so good.
So give me an example of a good example. And one of the things the book talks about is real estate agents.
Yeah.
And we assume they want to get us the highest price for our home right after all the work on commission. But the book kind of pokes holes in that.
Yeah, their incentives might not be as perfectly aligned with ours as we think.
Okay, so let's say I'm selling my house and you're my agent. Walk me through this.
Okay, so let's say your house sells for $300,000.
Okay.
And I, as your agent, get a 6% commission.
Okay.
That's $18,000.
Okay.
My cut of that is 25%. So I make $4,500.
Not bad.
Not bad. But now imagine I can squeeze out another $10,000 and we get the sale price to $310,000.
More money for me sounds great. What's the catch?
Yeah, you would get an extra $9,400, sure.
Okay.
But my share of that extra $10,000 is only $150.
Oh.
So the question is,
right.
Is it worth my time and effort to push for that extra $10,000 when I only gain an extra $150?
Suddenly that extra effort doesn't seem so appealing from the agent's perspective, does it?
No, not really.
You know, it makes me think about all those times I've struggled to get, like, my insurance company to pay out a claim.
Oh, yeah, that's another classic example of those misaligned incentives.
Yeah.
It's actually called a principal-agent problem. Your insurance company, the agent, is supposed to act in your best interest, the principal.
Right.
But their profit motive might actually lead them to deny claims or delay payouts. Just like with the real estate agent, their goals and yours aren't always the same.
So again, we need to be aware of those incentives at play.
Exactly.
Even in these seemingly straightforward situations, Freakonomics also reminds us that correlation doesn't equal causation. For example, just because cities with more police officers tend to have more murders doesn't mean that the police are causing the murders. It just means that there are more underlying factors driving crime in those cities that also require more police presence.
Exactly.
Like that ridiculous story about the Tsar who ordered all the doctors killed in his most disease-ridden province.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, getting rid of doctors wasn't going to solve the problem, but that's how we often think.
It really highlights how important it is to look beyond those surface-level correlations and kind of dig deeper to understand the complexities of a situation.
Right. So let's talk about something else that Freakonomics digs into, which is cheating.
Oh, okay.
Now, the book dives headfirst into this.
It does.
And it turns out cheating is way more common than we might think.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
It's not just students sneaking answers on a test. We're talking about teachers.
Right.
Sumo wrestlers. Even seemingly harmless office workers. And bagels.
And bagels.
What is the deal with the bagels?
Well, the bagel study is a classic. The authors studied this guy named Paul Feldman.
Okay.
Who ran a bagel delivery service for offices.
Okay. So he would leave bagels in a collection box. And rely on the honor system for payment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is he kept meticulous records.
Brilliant.
With how many bagels he delivered and how much money he collected.
Oh, so he was basically tracking office honesty.
Yeah.
He was.
Okay, I'm hooked already.
It's so good.
What did he find?
So he found that office size actually played a role. Smaller offices were more honest than larger ones.
Really?
And get this, good weather made people more honest too.
Maybe sunshine is a morality booster?
I don't know.
But seriously, why would office size matter?
Well, think about it. In a smaller office, you're more likely to know your coworkers. Yeah. The social pressure, to be honest, is higher when you're going to see those same people every day.
So it's like a built-in accountability system.
Yeah.
Like the bagel thief is more likely to get caught or at least feel guilty in a smaller office.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the same reason why street crime tends to be lower in rural areas compared to big cities. Social pressure is a powerful force. He also found that honesty dipped around holidays.
Really?
Especially stressful ones like Christmas.
Makes you wonder if all that holiday cheer has a dark side. Right. Okay, so weather, holidays, office dynamics, who knew honesty was so complicated?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And that leads us to another key theme from Freakonomics, information asymmetry.
Okay.
That sounds like a textbook term if I ever heard one.
It does.
Break it down for me.
Okay, so information asymmetry just means one person knows more than the other.
Okay.
So think about taking your car to the mechanic.
Okay.
They have all this expert knowledge.
Yeah.
You're kind of at their mercy.
Right.
Before the internet, experts had a huge information advantage, and they could use that to their benefit in all sorts of industries.
Like those life insurance salespeople who used to come knocking on your door.
Oh, yeah.
Or how about funeral homes? I bet those were shrouded in mystery before the internet came along.
Absolutely. Consumers had limited access to prices and options, making them vulnerable to being overcharged.
Right.
But the internet changed all that. Now you can compare prices for anything from caskets to life insurance policies right from your couch.
Yeah, it's like the internet leveled the playing field for consumers.
It did.
But I guess it also opened up new opportunities for what? Information crimes. Like we saw with those corporate scandals back in the early 2000s.
Absolutely. Enron, WorldCom.
Yeah.
These scandals involved experts manipulating or hiding information to maintain their advantage.
Right.
And these types of crimes can be really hard to detect.
Yeah.
Which means they can have a massive impact before anyone catches on.
Yeah. It's a reminder that information is power, and the internet, while a great tool, can be used for both good and bad.
Absolutely.
Freakonomics also encourages us to question conventional wisdom and rely on data to better understand the world.
Yes.
And the book kind of takes aim at experts who exploit public fear for their own gain, particularly when it comes to parenting.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we are constantly, as parents, bombarded with information about potential dangers to our kids.
Right.
Swimming pool accidents, kidnappings, even the dangers of certain baby products.
It's overwhelming.
It really is.
And sometimes these fears are blown way out of proportion to the actual risks.
Right. The book argues that parents often worry about the wrong things.
They do?
Overlooking less dramatic, but statistically more likely dangers.
Yeah.
Like, we freak out about swimming pools. But statistically, kids are far more likely to be injured in a car accident.
Right.
But we don't ban cars, do we?
Exactly.
Our perceptions of risk are often shaped by media coverage and emotional responses rather than cold, hard data.
Yeah, we have to get better about thinking rationally.
Freakonomics wants us to be more rational in our risk assessments and focus on evidence-based solutions.
Yes.
It's a good reminder to take a step back and analyze the information we're bombarded with.
Totally.
Especially when it comes to our kids.
Especially when it comes to our kids.
So we've talked about incentives, cheating, information asymmetry.
Yeah.
And we're just getting started.
We are.
There's still so much to uncover in Freakonomics. From the surprising link between legalized abortion and crime rates to the power of names.
Oh, yeah, we've got a lot to cover.
And then let's not forget those fascinating stories from the epilogue, like Stephen Levitt's unconventional journey to becoming a renowned economist.
Right.
And that intriguing self-experiment for weight loss.
Yeah, that's a good one.
We'll dive into all of that and more in the next part of your deep dive. But before we move on, I'm curious, what stood out to you so far?
Okay.
Anything that's really making you think?
Let me see. What's really hitting home for me is how widespread these incentive problems are. Like, we talked about real estate agents, but those misaligned incentives, they pop up everywhere.
They really do.
Remember those Chicago school teachers?
Oh, yeah.
High-stakes testing put immense pressure on them, especially in those struggling schools.
Yeah, the book talks about how some teachers resorted to cheating.
Yeah.
To make sure their students hit those targets.
Yeah.
I guess when your job security is on the line, the temptation to fudge the numbers can be pretty strong.
Yeah, it's tough because those teachers were really trying to do right by their students.
Right.
But the system incentivized the wrong behavior. And ultimately, it's the kids who pay the price.
Right.
When educators are pushed to prioritize those test scores over actual learning.
It's a stark reminder that even well-intentioned policies can have unintended consequences.
They do.
We have to be really mindful of the incentives we create.
Absolutely.
Now, you mentioned Stephen Levitt's unusual path to becoming an economist. What struck you about his story?
Oh, man, it's so inspiring. He didn't follow that typical straight and narrow academic route.
Right.
You know, he really focused on finding interesting questions and using creative, sometimes unorthodox ways to answer them.
Yeah, he wasn't afraid to be a bit of a freak.
A little bit. The
The book even talks about how some of his peers didn't take him seriously.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't obsessed with grades and traditional economics problems.
Right. He had a different vision.
Yeah.
He was all about writing these impactful research papers that explored really unconventional topics.
Yeah, like the economics of drug dealing.
Exactly.
I mean, this is not your typical economic stuff.
Oh, it's not.
And that unconventional approach ultimately led to his success.
It did.
He found a home at the University of Chicago, a place that valued original thinking.
Yeah.
And encouraged him to chart his own course.
To be himself.
It's a reminder that sometimes it pays to be a bit different.
It does.
As long as you're passionate and dedicated to your work.
As long as you're following your passion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of unconventional approaches, let's talk about that weight loss story from the epilogue.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It features this researcher, Seth Roberts,
Okay.
who basically conducted a self-experiment.
He did.
To outsmart his own body.
He did.
He was a foodie.
Yeah.
But he also wanted to lose weight without constantly feeling hungry.
Right.
Talk about conflicting goals.
Yeah, talk about willpower.
So he figured out a way to manipulate his body's natural signaling system.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So what did he do? Did he lock himself in a lab and live on protein shakes?
Nothing like that.
Oh.
He realized that certain flavors trigger the body to store calories.
Okay.
So he started consuming things that provided calories but didn't trigger that storage response.
Oh.
So he would drink unflavored oil and sugar water between meals.
That sounds pretty awful, honestly.
It does. It sounds terrible.
But it helped him feel full without activating those cravings.
Yeah, he basically hacked his own biology.
And get this, it worked.
It did.
He lost 40 pounds and kept it off.
Amazing.
It's like he hacked his own biology with these simple everyday ingredients.
He did, and it really underscores the power of self-experimentation and these data-driven approaches to problem solving.
Right.
Now, of course, I wouldn't recommend everyone start chugging oil.
Yeah, maybe not.
But Robert's story definitely challenges us to think outside the box when it comes to our health and well-being.
It's a reminder that sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective.
They can be.
And that we shouldn't be afraid to experiment and track our own data. Speaking of challenging assumptions, let's talk about one of the more controversial aspects of Freakonomics. It's exploration of crime.
Okay.
And the factors that contribute to it.
Right.
The book does not shy away from sensitive topics.
It does not.
It explores everything from the impact of legalized abortion to the effectiveness of innovative policing strategies like the broken windows theory.
Yeah, it really dives into some tough topics.
One of the core arguments is that understanding incentives is key to explaining why crime rates fluctuate.
Right.
For instance, the authors suggest that the decline in crime during the 1990s was influenced by a combination of factors, including increased incarceration rates, the waning crack cocaine market, and even the legalization of abortion years earlier.
Wow.
The abortion crime link is particularly controversial, but the authors emphasize that they're relying on data analysis, not personal opinions.
Right. They present this really compelling evidence that unwanted children are statistically more likely to grow up in environments that increase their risk of criminal behavior. Now, this is obviously a really complex issue.
Yeah.
And it's important to approach it with sensitivity and acknowledge the many factors involved.
Right. Freakonomics doesn't claim to have all the answers.
Yep.
But it certainly challenges us to think critically and examine data that might contradict our preconceived notions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes those data-driven insights lead to unexpected solutions. The book's exploration of sumo wrestling is a great example of this.
Wait, what?
Sumo wrestling. What does that have to do with crime?
Well, it's not really about crime directly.
Okay.
It's about using data to uncover these hidden incentives and expose unexpected behaviors, even in these seemingly sacred or untouchable domains.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these sumo wrestling shenanigans.
So the book analyzes data from thousands of matches.
Okay.
And finds this really peculiar pattern.
What's that?
Wrestlers on the verge of promotion are statistically more likely to win against opponents who have already secured their ranking.
So you're saying there might be some shady dealings going on behind the scenes of this ancient sport?
I'm just saying the data is interesting.
Okay.
The authors suggest that some wrestlers might be intentionally throwing matches to help their opponents reach a higher ranking.
Wow.
It's a classic example of how incentives, in this case, the desire for promotion, can drive unexpected behaviors, even in a sport that's supposed to be all about honor and tradition.
It's a reminder that human behavior is often driven by this complex mix of motivations.
It is.
And even in seemingly straightforward situations, there might be these hidden incentives at play.
Always look for the incentives.
Freakonomics encourages us to use data to challenge assumptions and uncover the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be.
Yeah.
And speaking of uncomfortable truths, the book also delves into the sensitive issue of racial disparities in the United States.
Yeah, it does.
This is a tough but important conversation to have.
It is.
The book explores the persistent black-white test score gap, a topic that has been debated and analyzed for decades.
Right.
And it challenges the traditional explanation that the gap is primarily due to inherent differences in intelligence between races.
Right.
Instead, the authors argue that a significant portion of the gap can be attributed to environmental factors.
Okay.
Such as school quality, family structure, socioeconomic status.
Yeah, so it's not about innate ability,
Right.
but rather the opportunities and resources available to different groups of students.
Exactly. They analyze data from the early childhood longitudinal study,
Okay.
which followed thousands of children from kindergarten through 5th grade.
Wow.
This study provides some really fascinating insights into the factors that influence academic achievement.
So what did it reveal?
One key finding was that black students in high-quality schools perform just as well as white students in similar schools.
Really?
This suggests that the quality of a child's education plays a crucial role in their academic success,
Yeah,
regardless of race.
that makes sense.
But the study also highlighted the impact of early childhood experiences and family background.
Right.
Children from disadvantaged backgrounds, regardless of race, tend to perform worse in school.
Right.
This points to the importance of addressing socioeconomic disparities and providing support for families in need.
Absolutely.
The book argues that these findings have really important implications for education policy.
Okay.
Instead of focusing solely on race-based solutions, they suggest that efforts should be directed toward addressing the underlying socioeconomic factors that contribute to the achievement gap.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's a nuanced and insightful perspective on this really complex issue.
Yeah, it is.
It encourages us to move beyond these simplistic explanations and consider the interplay of multiple factors.
Right. It's never just one thing.
It's never just one thing. Freakonomics consistently challenges us to examine our assumptions.
It does.
And to look beyond the obvious.
Yeah.
And reminds us that the world is full of surprises. Sometimes the most unexpected factors can have these really profound impacts on our lives and on society as a whole.
It's true.
Speaking of surprises, let's talk about how the book explores our perceptions of fear and risk. Remember that section about how parents often fear the wrong things?
Oh, yeah. I definitely remember that.
It's like we're constantly bombarded with warnings about potential dangers to our kids.
We are.
But the book argues that these fears are often blown out of proportion to the actual risks.
Right.
Parents worry about swimming pool accidents and stranger danger.
Yeah.
But statistically, kids are far more likely to be injured in a car accident or even at home.
And we don't think twice about putting them in the car.
Right. The book uses this really fascinating metric to compare the risk of different activities.
Okay.
The per-hour death rate.
Okay.
So, for instance, while more people die in car accidents than in plane crashes each year, the per-hour death rate of driving versus flying is actually quite similar. It's a thought-provoking way to look at risk and how our perceptions can be distorted by media coverage and emotional responses.
Right. Our emotions aren't always the best guide.
The book also points out how experts can play a role in shaping public perception of risk, often highlighting how fear can be exploited for political or economic gain.
Oh, yeah. Fear is a powerful motivator.
It really is.
And it can be used to manipulate people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that we need to be critical consumers of information.
We do.
And to base our decisions on evidence rather than on fear.
Facts, not feelings.
Facts, not feelings.
Yeah.
Freakonomics urges us to be more rational in our assessment of risk and to focus on evidence-based solutions.
Right. We need to think like scientists.
It's about empowering ourselves with knowledge and using data to make more informed choices.
Absolutely.
Now, after diving deep into Freakonomics, I'm curious, what do you think is the most impactful takeaway for readers? What message do you think stays with them long after they close the book?
That's a good question. I think, for me, Freakonomics is like this master class in critical thinking.
Yeah.
It's like they hand you this set of X-ray glasses to see the hidden forces that are driving the world around us.
Yeah, once you start noticing those hidden incentives and unintended consequences, you can't unsee them.
You can't.
Like, you start questioning everything, marketing campaigns, political decisions, even those everyday choices that we just take for granted.
Right.
Like, we think we're making these decisions based on logic and reason.
Yeah.
But Freakonomics shows us how often our choices are actually influenced by factors we're not even aware of.
Totally. It's eye-opening.
And that awareness is so powerful.
It is.
Once we understand those hidden incentives, we can make more informed decisions.
Right.
We can even start challenging those systems that perpetuate those incentives.
Yeah.
The book really dives into human nature, too.
It does.
You know, it reveals our biases,
our weird little quirks,
our motivations, and our sometimes hilariously irrational tendencies.
It's that bagel study.
I know.
Who knew that office workers' honesty could fluctuate with the weather?
I know.
It's so funny.
It reminds us that we're all susceptible to these subtle influences.
We are.
Even when we think we're being perfectly rational.
Yeah.
It's humbling.
It is.
And it's not just about understanding the world around us.
Right.
It's also about understanding ourselves.
Yeah.
Freakonomics nudges us to question our own assumptions and dig a little deeper into why we do the things we do.
Yeah. Why are we like this?
So if you're ready to see the world in a whole new light, Freakonomics is definitely worth a read. It's witty, engaging, and packed with thought-provoking insights.
It's a fun read, too.
Yeah, it's not a boring economics textbook.
No, not at all.
It's one of those books that stays with you long after you finish it.
It really does.
It makes you question everything in a good way.
In a good way, yeah. Makes you think.
Now, as we wrap up this deep dive, here's a final thought for you to consider.
Okay, I'm ready.
If even small choices, like picking a name for your child or grabbing a bagel from the break room, can be influenced by this web of hidden forces, what about those bigger decisions we make every day?
Oh, that's a good question.
What assumptions are we making? What incentives might be driving our choices without us even realizing it?
Right. It makes you wonder.
Food for thought.
It is.
Keep exploring.
Yeah.
Stay curious and never stop questioning the world around you.
Yeah.
You never know what fascinating insights you might uncover.
That's the fun part.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Freakonomics. We hope you've enjoyed the journey.
I did.
And that you'll keep those X-ray glasses handy as you explore the world.
Yeah, stay curious out there.